So episode 1, okay, the era ignited. Why Dabble starts now, okay? So we're in a new era, truth be told, right? And the old rules don't necessarily apply anymore. They're cooked. Right? I created Dabble. I could say I created it for this new era, but truthfully, it just came to me. This was just something that came to me. But more specifically into the actual era shift that we're kind of upon, right? This old system versus this new system, right? I basically talk about how we're evolving from the foundational era, right, to the transformational era. So let me just give you timelines for context. So timelines for context is from 2000 to 2025, right? Basically, Q1 of the 21st century. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm thinking about, like Q1 of the 21st century, the first 25 years of the 2000s, right, are basically complete. We're in 2025. The first 25 years of the 2000s are done. Right, for the first 25 years of the 2000s are they're among us. They are basically have run their course, is what I'm getting at. So beyond that, we're heading into what I like to call the transformational era, right? So we're leaving, right, the foundational era, and we're heading into the transformational era. Basically, this is Q2 of the 21st century, the next 25 years, 2026 to 2050, right? So that is essentially why my company's been built and why everything like you're seeing and why I'm going live and sharing this information in this context and this, all this stuff is happening right now, because we are literally on the cusp of an era shift, right? And not everybody understands this picture. Not everybody sees this picture that I see, truth be told, right? And I'm just blessed enough to have had built Dabble, right? Not knowing that it was going to be a leader for this next era, but understanding that it was going to be something that I could basically package all of my insights and experience into professionally, right? Personally and professionally, right? So that's kind of why I created the company. It really started out as a portfolio. Like I was literally just piecing together all of the work that I've done for different types of clients, freelance work, my past jobs, pieced it all together, saw all my different areas of expertise, and I was like, oh, I could probably create something. I could probably create a company or something. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how that started. But now that was in 2023 when I came up with Dabble, but now we're in 2025. And what has basically happened since is just refinement. It's just been a ton of refinement and understanding what it is I'm offering, how I'm offering it, how I'm looking to engage in the market, all this stuff you learn when you launch a business and you're just like, okay, so how are we now going to build this and grow this, right? So with all that said, right, any startup founder knows this, any entrepreneurs knows this, even creators know this, right? When you start off early, you get very attached to everything throughout the process. You get attached to what it is you do, your focus, your marketing expertise, if that's what it is. If you're a designer, it's your design expertise. If you're a real estate agent, maybe you're just hyper fixated on your real estate. Who knows what it is, right? But for me, I was super focused on the brand marketing and like the marketing, digital marketing expertise. I wasn't even like grasping or like conceptualizing philosophy or like unification or like anything. I was only thinking about execution and like implementing and like doing work for other people, right? Being that executor, which is not a problem when you're kind of in the early survival stages and you're building something from the ground up. That's kind of what you have to do. You have to get scrappy and just like eat whatever you can, right? With that said, I'm I really have kind of had an evolution over the past year, right? Just based off education, experiences, just learning a ton in just time, truth be told, right? And it's helped me zoom out on all of like the execution and all the business oriented stuff, and really actually create like a philosophy, like a angle in which I want to live by and I want to embody in my business, right? Because it's one thing to say, hey, yeah, we're going to come and transform your website or transform your brand, right? But it's a whole nother thing to be like, hey, I have a philosophy that helps you to understand that we're no longer in the foundational era and we're heading to a brand new era. And if you don't do the things you need to do as a brand and as a business and as a personal brand to equip yourself for this new era, you might get lost. Right? So that's been the evolution. It's not like me just being hungry and needy for business and clients and all this stuff. It's more so about, are you actually able to articulate a philosophy, like a mindset evolution within the people that you're looking to serve? Because if not, you're really just looking for a transaction. You're really just trying to get your pockets fat, which is not a problem, but you're not actually changing anything. Right, and it's gonna make getting your pockets fat harder. I'm basically speaking to myself, so don't take too much offense to that. With all that said, let's jump into some of these topics I have as it pertains to the old system versus this new sovereignty, right? That we're kind of looking at here, right? So, what systems are dying? What systems are dying from the old system, and what systems are kind of coming to life in this new system? Let's start with the old system. Within the old system, the foundational era, those first 25 years of the 21st century, right? You and I can both just go back. I'm 25 years old, as a matter of fact. You and I can just both go back, right, and just analyze, dang, .com boom, 1995 to 2001-ish, 2002, right? So the .com boom started the foundational era. The .com boom, right? Literally, like, everybody being on the internet and being like, oh, you have to get on the internet. You got to get on the internet. Oh, have you checked out the internet, right? You know what trips me out about the foundational era, and, like, especially when you look at it from where we're heading and where we are now? Bro, there were people within this era that said, I am not going to put my credit card information onto the internet, into a website, right? Like, I'm not going to do that. That is unsafe. That is unsecure, right? I'm going to get hacked. I'm going to get scammed. Bro, literally, people let the computer have storage and memory of their credit card details. So it makes it purchasing easier now. Think about that, bro. That's literally a 25-year change in mindset. From saying, I'm not going to put my credit card in this computer, to, honestly, I hope the computer has its own little wallet with all my credit card information so it makes all my purchasing easier. That's a 25-year transition, right? So if we're thinking about what systems are dying, it's a lot of those philosophies as it relates to the internet being a fad, right? Or something that's only for Silicon Valley or like the tech bros, something that's only for like nerds or like geeks who just spend all their time on their computers or whatever, PCs, right? And that's some of the philosophy that's dying, right? The systems that are dying, right? Just look at that is obvious. Look at all the systems that are emerging now. Music streaming, radio's dying, right? Blogs and newsletters and emails, right? Newspapers, dead, right? Magazines, cooked, right? There's tons of systems, right, from the foundational era, right, that just are basically obsolete literally 25 years later, right? So if we're thinking that we're on the cusp right now, 2025, going into 2026 through 2050, right, how does our thinking need to evolve as brands, as businesses, as creators, as founders, as entrepreneurs, right? Understanding that the digital age, right, the transformational era is upon us, right? The foundational era is gone, right? We went from freaking flip phones, right? We went from pagers and flip phones to freaking smartphones, gang. Right? You have to understand, pagers and flip phones to smartphones, you know what you could do on a pager? You could receive and send texts, and that is it. There's no internet browsing, there's no music streaming, there's no video streaming, nothing. Right? Now we have an infinite smart device in our hands, in our pockets, right? This is common knowledge at this point, right? This even sounds redundant even saying, because we're so deep into it, right? So since we're so deep into it, we have to really understand where we're about to go. Where are we about to go? Are we about to go backwards? No. No, guaranteed, right? With how I'm even operating and the tools I'm using and the businesses I'm building and like the brands that I'm helping and all this stuff, right? I'm understanding now this like AI, that might have been the signal of the actual shift, right? If we went from having smartphone, or we went from having pagers and flip phones to having smartphones, and now our smartphone just got smarter, because it has a series of computerized or a series of computers or a sequence of or a network of computers all synchronized that actually can tether together and extract information from 1 trillion different sources at once with one search query, right? That's kind of what we're on now. So the smartphone got infinitely smarter in the last 3 years. Bro, when I'm telling you that this transformational era is going to be different, it's going to be different. And we're literally in 2025 and it's just starting, right? So how is creativity being crushed by survival mode entrepreneurship? So that kind of goes back to what it is I was talking about earlier, right? Creativity being crushed by survival mode entrepreneurship. You're just in survival mode. You're trying to just acquire and get clients and do all this stuff, right? But you're not necessarily... you're not necessarily leveraging the systems that allow for you to have the success you want to have within this new era, right? If you're, truth be told, and that's kind of what I'm getting into, it's kind of how I'm even having this conversation with you. If you're hyper-focused on survival, implementation, execution, right, fulfilling the client work, right, but you don't actually have philosophy for execution, for implementation, right? You don't have a system that you can consistently reference that makes implementation and execution easier, not only easier, but more adaptable, right? Because that's where it's key, right? You'll constantly be in survival mode if you can't adapt, right? So that's really where I come into play, where DABL comes into play, right? Because we actually help people systemize things. We help people organize processes to help them get to where they want to go, right? We help bring order to chaos, truth be told, okay? So that's why a lot of creativity is being crushed by survival mode entrepreneurship, because you're literally hyper-focusing on executing on the client work, implementing whatever your boss or your freelance manager or whatever is telling you to do, your client is telling you to do. You're hyper-focused on that, but you don't even have a philosophy, a framework, a system that you can actually refer back to that makes your implementation and execution easier and more adaptable, right? So you're constantly literally pulling from all ends of your creative tank, but you don't actually have something to bring into creative projects that helps you to not get so depleted, right? So that is essentially what we help with. So for the creator, right, for the entrepreneur, for the founder, right, we help build those systems for the transformational era that don't drain you and keep you kind of in this burnout loop, right, where you can only have so much capacity, right, when the competition's at an all-time high. The necessity to have scalable solutions is at an all-time high because of the speed and the pace of the era we live in now, the competition, right? it's just vast, gang. We all have smartphones in our pockets. We all have freaking access to the internet. We all have access to artificial intelligence, which is again a series of a network, right? That is a network of computers that is sequenced together, right? That can pull and extract from a ton of sources of data with one search query, right? Not to mention that capability, but we can just have a conversation with it one-to-one. That's how all these models were built, to be conversational, to where you're now talking with probably the most intelligent person in your network anytime you open AI, right? But you don't deem it as a person, you deem it as a series of computers and all that stuff, right? But still, they have human consciousness. They have human consciousness to pull from. The AIs do. They have human consciousness to pull from, right? Let me open this door real quick because I feel like the signal's getting bad. It's kind of tragic that I have to do that, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, so keep on jumping forward. That's gonna bug me now. Screw it. So here's the next one. What are creators really feeling but not saying? I feel like I can't necessarily just answer that myself, but I will say that I do know, going back to what I was saying before, right? I feel like me as a creator, I can speak from my work as a creator, as a freelancer, right? I've definitely I've felt burnt out. I've felt like I only have so many creative ideas to pull from. I feel like even with all the use of these tools and AI, right, I don't necessarily have the best prompt engineering skills or like system development skills to even properly leverage AI, right? That's kind of what I think creators are feeling right now. And truth be told, if I'm accurate on that, tell me that's not a pretty prominent and obvious example that we're on the cusp of a significant era shift, right? When people are feeling like the ways in which they've developed all of their ability, right, and the way they actually implement their ability is not enough. That is T, right? And that's where I think we're at. So getting into like the meat of this real quick. So again, let's kind of jump back into the old era. The old era, right? Hustle, extraction, and commoditization, right? So I even go back a little bit further prior to foundational era. So prior to the 2000s, right? So I'm thinking like more 20th century, right? Industrialism, right? So when we think about that, right, which is essentially where our current civilization derives from, we derive from the Industrial Revolution, right? We are now in the internet revolution, right? The intellectual revolution, truth be told. So, or the digital revolution, rather. When you think about the Industrial Revolution, right, this is essentially factories, right? This is assembly lines. This is uniformity. This is lack of diversity. This is minimum wage at its finest. But this is also it's interesting because this is also how society operated at the time. So you having an industry, or you having you doing industrial work or working in a factory or whatever, that was normal. And not even normal, it was fairly sought after in some communities, right? So that's the industrial age, right? There's not much differentiation from person to person within the workspace and within making a living for yourself, right? The whole purpose of the industrial era, well, not the whole purpose, right? The whole purpose was production, right? But in turn, the whole purpose is also extraction, right? So you're extracting the time and energy from American citizens or from your citizens, right, for 40 to 60 hours a week, working in factories, all kind of getting a similar rate of pay, right, depending on where you're at, right? And since there isn't so much discrepancy, right, and there isn't so much since there isn't so much discrepancy, it kind of evens out the capital distribution, right? So meaning, right? So when you're thinking about, okay, you don't necessarily have a C-suite kind of executive that you're having to pay a large salary as it compares to the industrial workers, right? You kind of build your business where there is the top, right? And the top is just kind of operating everything. And then you have everybody that kind of operates within maybe this few dollars an hour fluctuation of pay, right? But that's kind of how the factory floor is, right? You might have your supervisor in this one area, but you might have the guys that just work on the assembly line, but their rate of pay isn't too vast of a discrepancy, right? So it's just interesting that that's where we're kind of coming from, is this industrialized, uniform, no individuality or intellect, right, that's actually being promoted, right? What's being promoted is uniformity and extraction and implementation and modern slavery. You know, like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's kind of what the deal is within the industrial era, right? And you can ask a lot of people that worked blue collar jobs at that time, right? Because those were the accessible jobs. White collar jobs weren't even like accessible to the majority of people unless you went to university and this, that, and the third and all that stuff, right? But even now, as we bring that to now, man, there's a whole nother different kind of minutia that we need to sort through now. You know what I'm saying? As we're transitioning from the foundational era into the transformational era, right? What we're noticing is the people that were actually able to find their ways into white collar work or find their ways into higher supervisor positions, right? Or find their ways into universities, right, through financial aid and things of that nature, right? Those people were actually able to make somewhat of a living for themselves for that first 25 years of the 21st century, right? They were actually able to kind of carve out their little corners of society, right, or corners of civilization for their family and for them to build and grow and get into suburbs and neighborhoods and this, that, and the third, right? But at the same time, we're heading into a new era that is almost even more reliant on intellect in so many different innovative ways that it's creating a new gap, is basically what I'm getting at. It's creating a new gap. So me streaming right now, right? I got my Canon camera, I got my laptop, I got my PC or my monitor, right? And I got my HDMI, I got my USB-Cs, USB, all plugged in, all intricate, right? Make sure my audio is coming out the right ports and the camera, all this stuff, right? So this is the level of intellect that's needed today just to stream, right? That's like a foreign area of intellect and information to a 60-year-old. You know what I'm saying? Or a 40-year-old even, right? Who may have not grown up with 1080p. You know what I'm saying? You didn't even grow up with 1080p, let alone PCs, let alone smartphones, let alone, you know what I'm saying? So these people that were literally born in 99, 2000, praise God, right? And were equipped with all this knowledge and information from our developmental years throughout the foundational era, are truthfully the most equipped to lead change in the transformational era, right? whether we know it or not, unless you're one of those gurus on Silicon Valley and you were just kind of studying human psychology within the early 2000s and late 90s and just kind of piecing together all these different pieces of technology that even got us here. Because you have to understand the orchestration that goes into evolution, right? We got here for a very specific reason, right? These people were studying our human behavior. They were studying our human design, right? And then hiring people that are actually called user experience developers, right? So you have people that literally study the user, right? And then design experiences that comply with our makeup, that align with our makeup, that align with how we navigate certain things as it pertains to technology, right? So there's a new gap, right? And the reason why I'm building DABL is, like, I understand that there's a new gap and it needs to be mended, right? Because we can't just leave people behind. I think beyond us heading into a new era and beyond us leaving industrialism behind and evolving into the digital age, right, is also a responsibility to kind of acknowledge the hierarchy, acknowledging the hierarchy and acknowledging the segregation within the hierarchy and what that's done to us, right? Because that's made it to where the 50, 60-year-old doesn't feel comfortable getting advice from the 20, 30-year-old because the hierarchy says I'm supposed to have more intellect and information with them, but we're in the middle of an era shift, and there's a huge gap, and there actually is, right, an aptitude gap, right? There actually is the need for us to be able to help each other so that these people that are still kind of on the back half of their lives, they can still live and thrive, right, without having to settle. I had a crazy theory not too long ago that likely the workforce over the next 5 to 10 years is going to make up majority 40 plus, 50 plus, right? I'm talking about the workforce, not necessarily entrepreneurs, right? Because entrepreneurs that understand that we're heading into the transformational era, right, they're going to be equipped with the aptitude, the intellect, the information, the skills, and capacity to navigate this era, right, to build things they need to build in the digital world and thrive. But there is a segment of society that does not have that level of aptitude, that does not have that level of awareness, right, that's not that interconnected, right, that whose brains aren't as agile, right? So it's like, but truth be told, and this is where it gets tea, right? Those are the people with the bread. Those are also people with bread right now, right? But if they don't understand, or if they haven't built things to sustain them into the future, right, then those are going to be the people that need to use their bread to pay for these modern solutions, right? Thus DABL, thus me positioning my brand and my agency as that modern solution to help people navigate through the transformational era, right, and bridge the gap between the foundational and the transformational, right? Because there's too many people that are going to need assistance, right? There's too many people within my immediate network that I literally have conversations with all the time. And the way I see the internet and the way I see the digital landscape and the way I see the creator economy and the digital economy is completely different from how they see it, right? And my ability to do certain things and make certain things happen with relative ease is completely different from what they're able to complete and what they're able to do. And this is not me bragging and gloating. This is me understanding my responsibility, and that's why I'm building this company, right? So a little bit of a ramble, but this is what this is for. I love this. So again, this is kind of a concept I want to introduce briefly, right? The concept of a regenerative brand, right? Not just one that sells, but one that restores. So essentially, that's what it is I'm building. I'm building a regenerative brand. And when I help clients, when I help potential partners, that's what I want to help them build. I want to help them build regenerative brands, right? And the reason why that's so necessary, again, is because there's a new gap. There's a new gap between this old system, right, and this new sovereignty, right, that people are experiencing, right? And I kind of want to dive in more specifically, right, into the sovereignty, and I'll kind of show how the regenerative brand works into that. But the sovereignty is something that I'm like, obviously kind of an abstract word, but essentially, like, I think of like autonomy. I think of being able to do what it is you're called to do, but being able to do it on your terms in a way, right? Being able to do what you're called to do, but being able to do it in a way that suits you, right? Being able to do what you're called to do, but being able to do it in a way that's beneficial to not only you, but also your family, right? So that, and not just monetarily, you know what I'm saying? Monetarily, yes, we do live in a capitalistic society and you have to make money, right? But it's more so like emotionally. Do you even have the emotional capacity after your 50-hour work week to go and acknowledge and spend a genuine moment with your son or daughter? You know what I'm saying? You know, like that's real. That's actually real. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to regeneration, right, and how that contributes to new sovereignty is I'm leveraging all of my intellect as it pertains to being born in the foundational era, right? Leading people into the transformational era, right? I'm using all my intellect to help people build brands that essentially leverage all of these modern, right, capabilities that we have at our disposal, right? That being automation, that being AI, right? That being system integration, system development, that being software, right? That being modern marketing, social media, all this stuff, right? That being modern marketing, social media, all this stuff, right? So there's a number of areas that I want to kind of jump into and help people. And I have this quote here. It's basically, this isn't just about content, it's about identity, right? It's about building something that doesn't burn you out, right? That's kind of what it is I'm looking to help these brands with, right? Especially as we're going through this era shift. Imagine being a 50-plus-year-old person trying to acquire all of the knowledge, skills, aptitude to build a successful brand and thrive now. You know what I'm saying? Are people capable of doing that? 1,000%. Yes, 1,000%. But I'm saying in comparison to someone who has all of the intellect and information and like grew up with it and the practices are literally like ingrained in them, it's just completely different, right? It's just completely different. And I'm noticing within my feeds and within my algorithms, these dudes are getting younger and younger, being able to access information and learn things for themselves and deploy solutions for themselves that get them out of obscurity, that get them out of like, obscure situations. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like there's so much possibility. And that's kind of what I talk about. So just to kind of like wrap and bring things together a bit, right? I genuinely think we're in the most important shift for creators since the invention of Instagram, right? And I think Instagram was created in like 2007 or something, or maybe 2013, right? But like, it's even more than Instagram. It's beyond Instagram. You can say all of social media, truth be told, right? You can say YouTube, all that, right? Because we're heading into an era that like encompasses everything, right? So this kind of brings me back to my top point, right? And this is where I feel like it's the best place and the best starting point to truthfully help, right, those that may be of a different generation that are looking to thrive, right, in this new era, right, is understanding that they have the wisdom, they have the experience, right? Our parents, our peers, our older peers within our network, they have the intellect, right? They have the perspective. That's the word. They have the perspective, right? Which means if they have the perspective, then they have the philosophy, right? A lot of them just haven't put it together, right? And haven't put it together leveraging modern tools that make the putting together of it easier, right? So if we understand that we can adopt and develop our own individual philosophies. Now, this is not necessarily countering religion or having a conversation about religion. I'm talking about your individual philosophy as it pertains to what your gifts are, right? What your passions are, what your purpose is, right? What your personality is, right? Who your ideal customer persona is, how you want to position yourself in the market, right? And how you want to place, right, your solutions within the marketplace, right? That's kind of what I'm talking about. So it's more so about you adapting your philosophy and then understanding who connects with your philosophy, right? And then building all of your solutions upon that philosophy, right? Because then it's uniquely you. It's uniquely your perspective. It's uniquely your experiences, right? And this is how I help brands differentiate themselves, right? Any brand. It's not necessarily just my older peers or the elders within my network. This is how I help brands differentiate themselves, because each brand owner, each founder, creator, entrepreneur has a unique set of experiences, right? Has a unique journey, right? Has a unique perspective, right? If you help that person to package that perspective into philosophy, right? And then you build whatever it is you build atop your philosophy, there's no way you don't attract people of a like mind, right? There's no way you don't create your ideal customer and grow your business with a bed of ideal customers, right? Let's not say bed, but anyway, with an influx of ideal customers, right? So that's my vision, that's my goal, right? So me kind of sharing the era shift and where we're at, where we're going, all this stuff. This is that, right? This is what it's for. This is me building DABL live. I'm literally in my office. This is where I get my work done. This is where I lock in, right? This is where I leverage all of my intellect from the foundational era, right, heading into the transformational era, piecing all together my camera, my laptop, my monitor, right, my mic, to where I can actually stream live to you guys, right, because I love the live conversation, and then I can also use this for podcast content later and short form content later, right, and that's how I visualize this stuff, right. I visualize it from a different angle than people that didn't necessarily grow up in this era or grow up with this era ingrained in their day-to-day life, right? With their agile, pliable minds that just took to all of the innovation that was happening around us within the foundational era, but now so into the transformational era. So again, I'm definitely going to package this up as a podcast. It's likely going to be packaged up as a newsletter, right? But again, I just kind of wanted to touch on the era shift, the big era shift, right? From our old system to this new sovereignty